Alright, what the hell is Maru's curse technique? Let's talk about it. Okay, so where to even begin? Because Maru was doing a bunch of insane things with his ability in Chapter 6, starting with levitating a bunch of basketballs, right? And levitating actually a bunch of objects throughout the chapter, which causes the curse user he was fighting against to say, oh, is this technique anti-gravity? But then he goes, no, it's probably not, but it's using a similar concept. But we're not stopping with just levitating objects, because Maru will go on to boil, or at the very least, superheat water and then also freeze it, at which point the curse user thinks to himself, okay, his curse technique can distort the natural laws of order itself. And then finally, on multiple occasions, we have seen Maru use this third eye to basically stupefy his opponents, dating back to the first chapter where he knocks that kidnapper unconscious with it, to this chapter where he basically induces a state of confusion in the curse user with it. So what kind of curse technique could encompass all of those things, right? And the first thing I want to say is that maybe that's the wrong way to think about it. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, Maru and his brother and all of the Simurians are aliens, right? They hailed from the stars in another homeworld. And yes, they have cursed energy and wield sorcery, but they might do it in a completely different way. Like, those things might have gone down a different evolutionary pipeline on their homeworld, meaning it might not be fair or entirely correct to call what Maru is doing his curse technique. That's just how Earthlings and humans understand it, because that's how it manifested and developed on our world. Now, maybe it's the exact same on the Simurian homeworld, and he does have a curse technique exactly as we'd understand it, but it's at least possible that they're just not put in the same box in the same way. So just throwing that out there. But with that said, I am going to try and put this in a nice little box. So how can we explain levitation, explosions, heating, and freezing, right? And the first thing I thought of was entropy. It feels like just inducing chaos into a system, or affecting the energy equilibrium of a system, if you will. Like, you could kind of make the water molecules more chaotic, induce more entropy, and they would heat up, right? And similarly, if you could remove that from the equation, then perhaps they would freeze. And thinking about the levitation is a bit more complicated here, but if you're thinking about, again, the balance in a localized system, if you were, you could kind of manipulate how the ball is interacting with the space around it, perhaps causing it to levitate. And certainly when he caused all of the basketballs to explode, that could be increasing the entropy in that localized spot, or again, shifting the energy balance to go way to the basketball side of things, causing it to explode. Now, I know that sounds a little convoluted, but bear with me here, because I think this really starts to make sense when we look at Maru and his character, and also the story that Gege Akutami is seemingly trying to tell here. And especially if we date back to Chapter 1, which is the only time Maru talks about his curse technique. If you recall, he and Yuka needed to track down Tsurugi, and Maru is like, oh, I'm going to use my curse technique, which, again, he uses that phrasing because that's not anything his alien homeworld has ever referred to it as. And he says, I will bring you and the world into harmony. My curse technique will seek balance and find the person who is an equal match to you. In other words, I'll find Tsurugi. So he cites his technique as harmony, right? Now, how do we make that make sense with everything I was just talking about with entropy and shifting the energy equilibrium, right? Well, this would be the natural opposite to that, right? The other side of the coin. Maru, who is this upbeat, really kind-hearted person, again, back in Chapter 1, he was trying to use this power for good, would view it this way. And it's only when he loses control in Chapter 6 and basically goes, sleeping master style, unconscious, that he's using this power in really horrific ways. So if you think of it, again, as an equilibrium, as a balance of energy, Maru's technique could be manipulating that balance. He can shift it one way, push towards harmony, which allows him to kind of allow this connection between Yuka and Tsurugi to resonate, allowing them to follow that harmony and find her brother, right? Or he could shift it towards entropy, pushing the energy to a more destructive sense and cause cause things to superheat or freeze or explode like those basketballs. And I think this gets even more interesting considering the twin dynamic Gege has established with Maru and Cross. They are two sides of the same coin as well, and we know that they do not see eye to eye on things. They actually have a rift in their relationship, something that Maru wants to fix, and Cross, at least thus far, we haven't really seen him care too much about. But again, Maru, for all intents and purposes, is the happy, optimistic, will find a way one, whereas we've seen Cross basically preparing for war. It could be that in this harmony, we have Maru typically representing the harmonious side of things, whereas Cross has been more so the kind of entropy or the pessimistic one. And specifically in chapter 6, we have a nice inversion of that, right? Because Maru loses control, something that Cross even comments on, and it's Cross that has to kind of lock into that empathy that, I don't necessarily want to call it optimism because he kind of moves of his own accord. He doesn't even really understand why he intervenes, but he does because he was moved by Tsurugi, right? So they kind of swap. Maru represented the entropy, the destruction, and Cross was forced, maybe not forced, but filled the role of kind of the harmony, the optimist, the one that's going to try and find a way by stopping his brother. They are two sides of this coin, as is their curse technique. And to take this a step further, let's look at what this series is called. Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo with the 3-line equals sign, which is a specific symbol in both logic and mathematics and philosophy, which essentially means identical to or congruent to or equal to under these specific circumstances. It's literally a symbol that denotes things being in harmony with each other, finding the ways that this system could be at equilibrium. So it would make a whole bunch of sense if one of the main character's abilities was all about that equilibrium and perhaps being able to manipulate it. Again, either pushing things towards harmony or pushing them towards chaos and entropy. Maru and Cross having that ability would just serve as a way to examine that concept on a micro level, right? How do two individuals in this world find that balance literally with their ability? And we also have that concept being explored with the Okotsu siblings. Now, they're not twins and they don't have a harmony balance, but obviously they too have a rift and they're trying to find that harmony within their own relationship, centered around Yuta's ring and just their general dynamic, right? So we have this concept being explored on the micro level, and then obviously the macro of this story is the exact same thing, right? We're trying to find the harmony and the balance between two different civilizations, the humans and the aliens. Now, at the end of the day, I don't know the best singular word to put on this idea to label as his curse technique. Do we want to call it harmony? Do we want to call it entropy manipulation or energy manipulation within a system? Again, I don't know, but I just think that general idea fits like a shoe with everything Gege has been telling us. Now, one thing I did want to add on here is that the third eye stuff, the way that induces a state of confusion or unconsciousness, how exactly does that play into this harmony entropy equation, right? And I do think we could kind of squeeze it in there. Maybe he's increasing the entropy in someone's brain, whatever we want to call it, maybe it could make sense. But I also think that it's at least possible that that specific facet of what Maru is doing is maybe not tied to his explicit ability, but could be just a physiological trait of certain Sumerians, right? Maybe not all of them, because all of them don't necessarily have the same third eye structure, but we have seen other ones with it, like Dabura. So maybe that could be something like the six eyes. And I'm not saying that it is the six eyes, but similar to how Gojo's six eyes weren't part of his curse technique, they were just one of his physiological traits. Maybe the Sumerians have physiological traits with abilities as well. And so maybe, the confusion induction is just something that they're capable of removed from the technique. But all that being said, it could be part of the technique too. So anyways, that's my general thoughts on it right now, but I would love to hear all of y'all's ideas because this is the best part of a new series. We get to get into the theory crafting before we actually find out all of the concrete answers. And as fate would have it, I actually got a comment while I was putting this video together from user who said that his idea is maybe it has something to do with pressure. Water under pressure can freeze into ice, and maybe pressure is what explains how sorcerers are getting confused. So I like this too. And so I would love to hear y'all's ideas all down in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching.